Welcome on into BKL Nightly. This is the Let's Talk Ball edition. I'm Thad Brown. He is Carl Jones. Every single week we go through the X's and the O's, the All-22 film from every single Bills game, tell you about the highs, tell you about the lows. This week we'll tell you about the weather. But either way, you get a full breakdown with what happens with every single Bills game. And Carl, speaking of the weather, look, one of the first things that jumped out to me when you turn on the All-22 is that everybody wasn't exactly running at the same speed they normally run. I kind of compared it to you and your brother when you're 10 and 8 years old or whatever, and you want to run around the house without waking up mom, and you're running, but you're kind of tiptoeing as you run so no one hears any noise. That's what it looked like. So the question to you is, right off the bat, if a normal game in a dome would be a 10 in terms of how you evaluate everybody who played, what is this game on a scale of 1 to 10 because the footing was totally different for this one?
Yeah, I think you can still look at the game plans themselves and think like, oh, that would have been sound regardless if it was played on Mars or on in the Carrier Dome. But individual players, I think you kind of have to put it to like more of a 6-7-ish range. It was rough out there, especially that second quarter range where the snow was really coming down. I talked to AJ Epinesa actually after the game, and I said, listen, as a former DB, I've played in 2 snow games, and it is really hard to break, and you have to change how you do it. Like, there isn't that stab that you want to get. You kind of got to pity patter it a little bit. So I asked him, I said, is it that much harder as a pass rusher? And he goes, I don't want to make excuses, but it really limits your bag and how you get after the quarterback. And he said, offensive linemen know that too, to where you're not going to turn the corner. You're going to try to have to run through me play after play. So that portion of it definitely adds some context as to why both teams really couldn't get after the quarterback, and things look really up and down, especially in that second quarter for both teams.
It's a great comment because that is something, the moment you said that, I thought to, 3 or 4 different pass rushers to where, wow, they're only really going with that move today, or there really isn't a whole lot of variance to what they're attempting to attack the quarterback with. So that certainly jives with everything I saw. Let's start with the Bills offense in this game, and let's start with Josh Allen, because we don't talk about how good he is on really any program enough, because it happens so dang often. We're all out of words. I'm in the locker room trying to ask questions to guys. What do you think of Josh Allen? It's the same question every week. But in this game, Carl, I thought he was uniquely good with his ability to make big game-changing plays, 4th down plays, 4th and goal plays happen. And the fact that the number of times we've talked this year about Josh Allen missing things, leaving things in the field, I didn't see a lot of that in this one.
I'm never going to tell anyone how to be a fan. I think that's what makes sports great, is that we all are fans in our own different right. And that is that. I will say this, though. If you are a Bills fan out there, no matter how any season ends up, you should never, ever take for granted what 17 does back there every single Sunday. The combination of height, weight, speed, tenacity, aggressiveness, the will to always try to leave it out there on the field is unmatched by any player I've ever seen, truthfully, at the quarterback position. Not calling him the best I've ever seen, but that unique combination and bottled up into one quarterback has never been duplicated in NFL history. And I like to think I know a little bit of something about the good old days back in at least dating back to the 70s. But I digress. He's a special quarterback, and it was on full display Sunday with the arm angles, his ability to know when to leave the pocket, when he was making some of those throws on the sideline. Just a phenomenal quarterback that I just hope, I know Bills fans don't, but just never take for granted who he is as a player.
And I go back a little further than you, and I can underline it, that the physical combination is absolutely unmatched. There is not, and there may not be another guy like this. I probably shouldn't say that because quarterback's getting more athletic, bigger, stronger, whatever. But yes, the physical things he can do, there isn't a guy who has ever played the position, whether it's Bart Starr, Johnny Unitas, Joe Montana, whoever, who can touch the physical ability that Josh Allen can do. And the other thing that you pointed out there, a lot smaller on the big quarterback scale, he also was in and out of the pocket at the right times. He hung in when he had to. He made throws under pressure when he had to. This, to me, in terms of operating in the pocket, was the cleanest game. It might not be the best game because, like you said, he can do some ridiculous stuff that takes the small mistakes and negates them. But in this game, there weren't the small mistakes. There wasn't the play where, oh, what are you scrambling for, Josh? You got time. There was none of that. He was right on almost every single decision, and it paid off with a number of 4th down plays. The one that I want to bring up, because a lot of people are talking about it, is the Khalil Shakir play. From a defensive back point of view, give me your take on it. I want to point out, I kind of in the camp of it's not as good as everybody says it is, which isn't hard to say because I think most people see it as like the greatest play in the history of football. But regardless, it's still an amazing play.
Yeah, I think that for one, it's really difficult to plaster on a receiver for that long. And I think that the further and longer a play goes on, you kind of lose your technique and your rules as a defensive. But like you're just trying to just make anything shake at that point. That's when you see a lot of holding, a lot of PIs when they're 4 or 5 seconds into a down. So it was a remarkable throw. Good concentration by Khalil Shakir, by the way, when it gets through all of that traffic. I don't even know if it was a DB that was guarding him. I think it was a linebacker. It was a linebacker. So kind of adds even more so to the fact that when you get that deep into the down, hey, all that technique you learned, you go through on Tuesday about, hey, you shooting through the hands, you keeping your eyes on the receiver. Now that goes all out the window once we get 6, 7 seconds into the down. Just a remarkable play by all parties involved.
The Josh Allen part that I liked the best was keeping the play alive, being able to find something that was available, being able to make the throw at the last moment it was available, which are things he does all the time. The thing about the throw itself is that Josh Allen's gotten very good at when he sees a defender in man coverage with his back turned, you can pretty much just throw it. It almost doesn't have to be accurate. It just has to miss the defender because the defender can't see the ball coming and the receiver can. And that's a skill that he's gotten really good at, but it also kind of takes that individual throw. And I look at it and say, I've seen him do that a dozen times. You see a back turned, and other quarterbacks do it too. Just throw the ball and miss the defender. And that's what he did. Still an incredible play, but maybe not the mind-blowing thing that has been talked about some places on social media. Speaking of mind-blowing, Cincinnati linebackers, to me, have the worst eyes in the history of football. I know they're young guys, so that's probably a part of it, but the Bengals came in as the worst defense by a lot against tight ends, and Joe Brady had no problem snipering those linebackers to take advantage with his tight ends in this game.
Listen, Joe Brady was up in that press box Sunday afternoon and said, we got him. We got him. Right there, we got from the first snap of the game, and I know the run game, the Bills have a really good run game, so that plays a part into it. But there's no way on God's green earth that Dawson Knox should ever be that wide open on a just generic over route. And the fact that they peppered him in different, and it wasn't just the same play. Sometimes it was a boot to get Josh out of the pocket, and you knew the linebacker's eyes were going to be bad in that regard. What about a quick little flat route with Dawson and K? There were so many different ways to just take advantage of the poor discipline of the Bengals linebackers. It doesn't have to be anything drastic or creative or any tight end throwback or anything jazzing it up like that. They suck. I say this respectfully. They suck at the simple things. Let's just make them try to guard that. And the fact that he didn't make anything too complex or try to make himself the hero of the show, just say, hey, they are really bad at defending tight ends. Let's just get those guys the ball.
Without going through every single mistake or every single advantage that was taken or opportunity that was taken advantage of by the Bills, I like to go from the beginning to the end. The first play you talked about, the 30-yarder to Dawson Knox, is that linebacker blitzing, Carl? I don't even know what he's doing. He ran 3 yards forward like it's the worst bite on a play action ever and then turned around and wondered, what am I supposed to do? Well, the tight end, sir, is about 12 yards behind you running with the ball. That was the first play of the game. Let's fast forward all the way down to the Jackson Haas touchdown, where for some reason the Bengals decided that Reggie Gilliam was worth 3 defenders on a 4th down. They triple covered the fullback on a 4th and goal from the 4, which is one of the reasons why Jackson Haas is open. And even then, there's a linebacker standing next to him who could have just stepped over 2 steps and been there. We talk about it all the time. It's never as bad as you think or as good as you think. Boy, it was as bad as you think in this one, wasn't it?
No, it was awful. It was about as bad as it gets. I think they've given up 15 touchdowns this year, just to tight ends.
Yes.
And I believe they've given up, I don't want to get the exact yardage right, but
it's close to 13. It's 1260 something, I'm pretty sure.
Which is the most in dating back to 2015, and they've only played 13 games. That's right. How bad we're talking here. I mean, once again, good on the Bills coaching staff for not making this any more complex than it needed to be.
The joke in the fantasy football world is that the best tight end in football right now is whoever's playing the Bengals. That's what it is. And you think about their season, 12, 60, and 15 touchdowns, you would be winning multiple fantasy championships if that was your tight end this year. Speaking of the coaching staff doing things good, one of the small things I liked a lot is that this is a team when it comes to the run game, they love to go inside zone. That's the favorite play. You see James Cook take a handoff to the left, cut it back to the right. Well, in this game, because of the footing, you could tell right away that play was not going to work. James Cook did not have the dimes to cut on to make that effective. So the Bills said, the heck with it. Let's run duo all game. We'll just power through this team. And you didn't see a ton of explosive runs. But, Carl, I thought this run game, play in and play out, was as effective as it needed to be. And we'll put aside the James Cook fumbles. That's not what we're talking about on this show. But the run game itself worked just fine, even in conditions that were not super perfect.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the Bills' run game so unique and special is that there are a lot of teams. I think of the Eagles last year. They were amazing last year. I'm not going to get it twisted, but what made them in a different galaxy is that Saquon Barkley would break off a 60-yarder once a week. But down to down, they still were just good as opposed to great. Well, the Bills, and no matter what analytical stat you want to put up, they are excellent in terms of explosive runs as well as down to down. And I think it doesn't matter how you want to jazz it up. If you want to, gap everything out and then have no safety deep, they can break off a 60-yard bomb to take advantage of it. If you want to stay back and make them get 6-7 yards of carry, they have no problem living in that world either. So I think Sunday was another example of that. They didn't get a lot of explosive runs, but they took advantage of everything underneath.
Always helps when the offensive line is doing its job. And the Bills got their left tackle back in this game, Dion Dawkins, after missing the last one with a concussion. And of course, the Texans game before that was not a very good game at all, maybe one of the worst of his career. This game was kind of up and down, and Dion even talked about it afterward that he was having trouble with some of the blitz looks that the Bengals were throwing, and had to complimented the David Edwards communication for helping getting him in the right spot for the Josh Allen 40-yard touchdown run. You want to point to a couple plays that Dion had in this game that kind of exemplified the ups and the downs of number 73 in this game.
Yeah, and I think that play you talked about is the down, but also ended up being good. The first one, though, I think is the first fourth down of the game where Josh Allen hits Gabe Davis when he rolls to his left. Dion just completely obliterates Joseph Asai rushing off the left edge, where he does that little signature snatch trap where he puts him on the ground. That's an example of, hey, when he's healthy and he's locked in on his technique, he's a Pro Bowl caliber left tackle. And then we fast forward to the fourth quarter, that play that you spoke with Dion after the game about, where hey, he maybe didn't have the assignment right, but he eventually did get it right, and he took advantage. He blocked the most dangerous blitzer. So the fact that the guy off the edge who has the furthest path to get to Josh Allen, Josh can see that. He steps up in the pocket and it's off to the races, strike up the band. And I think that's an illustration of when Dion, a good example of his physical capabilities at full display, but also when he's locked in mentally, he can be one of the best tackles in football.
Locked in mentally is a good point, too, because the fourth down play where Josh Allen took the near sack, the near fumble, whatever you want to call it, where they failed, that was a play where it didn't seem like Dion was fully mentally engaged or ready for the snap. Not that he was mind wandering, just when the ball was snapped, wasn't dialed in, right. And Joe Asai really got into his body, and that's the reason why Josh Allen takes a hit. I think at the end of the day, we've talked a lot about where Dion is, and I think this season as a whole would not be what Dion Dawkins would want it to be at. But this game, and especially that play at the end that helped spring Allen for the 40-yard touchdown run, is an example of the fact that the Bills still have very much a plus tackle or a plus player at left tackle, which is a huge start when it comes to any defensive or offensive line. David Edwards is another guy I wanted to bring up real quick. I loved the athleticism in this game, and I've liked a lot of what I've seen from David Edwards all year long. He had a play in this game which was another Josh Allen scramble. It was the other third and long, it was 3rd and 5 actually, but a 16-yard scramble. So on the play, Edwards is supposed to step out and basically attack the spy. So a lot of times what the Bills like to do, if you spy Josh Allen, well, we're going to put an offensive lineman right on him so we have a blocker there ready to go as far as we can go without having someone downfield illegally. On that play, the spy backed up into coverage. So Edwards has to circle back around into pass protection, which is a ridiculous technique for an offensive lineman. Maybe he got a little lucky about what side he went to, but by going to Josh Allen's right, when he scrambles to the right, now David Edwards is there to block a guy, I think 2 guys. Regardless, he creates the lane to allow Allen to get to the outside and get a first down. The bigger picture that we may not have a full time to discuss here, but at the end of the season, both Connor McGovern and David Edwards have their contracts come to an end. And there's been a little talk in training camp about, well, I don't know if the Bills can bring both, so which one do you bring back? And generally the thought is you want to bring back the center. He runs everything, and that still may be true. David Edwards is very much playing himself into a discussion of, is he not the better player and maybe the one that is more needed to return next year in a big contract, with it being 0 knock on Connor McGovern?
Yes, Cybo's also entering the last year of his deal, so they got some discussions they need to make on. I do not envy that situation with Brandon Beane whatsoever, considering the other needs on that roster. I do want to talk about the receivers for a second here. I know that we haven't had our weekly Keon Coleman conversation. I know the route that went viral this week where I believe it was DJ Turner, whoever that was, almost picked it off, where Keon, it was snowing, but the route was, let's just say, less than ideal. He played the least amount of snaps of any wide receiver this week. In fact, I have the numbers in front of me. He played 18 snaps, 28%. That was less than Brandon Cooks, who has been here just long enough to get a name on the back of his jersey. So I say that that whenever Josh Palmer gets healthy, I assume that Keon Coleman's probably going to be the odd man out. Gabe Davis has been here a month and a half in terms of being on the roster, active roster. He played 58% of the snaps at wide receiver. So I think that goes to show you where they think of Keon Coleman at this point.
Gabe Davis, at the very least, is a better blocker. You saw that on a couple plays in this game. And Keon Coleman later in the game that I'm sure didn't go viral, but something I noticed, he had a clear out route that he very much did not throttle up for in a high red zone spot. So just in terms of what you're getting out of all the receivers, Keon Coleman is the one who's providing you the least. And it's unfortunate, too, because with this group, there's not a whole lot there that scares you with the other guys. There's not an upside. There's not a ceiling to reach. And Josh Palmer, I think, is better than a lot of these other receivers, but even he doesn't have, at least we haven't seen yet, the very high ceiling. So it's unfortunate if Keon is the odd man out, but I agree with you. He's the guy that shouldn't play. One more thought on the receivers. As ineffective as they've been the last couple of weeks, in large part because running backs and tight ends have been just wildly easier to use. In this game, Gabe Davis still had a fourth down catch. Khalil Shakir had a fourth down touchdown. Tyrell Shavers had a really nice back shoulder for a first down. Even Cooks drew a pass interference in this game. Can the Bills live if they get that level of contribution? Let's say they get 2 of those plays from their receivers per quarter, which when you look at Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, they get like 2 every 3. But for the Bills, considering what they can do with the running backs, what they potentially can do with the tight ends, is 2 plays a quarter enough? They didn't get that in this game, but might it be?
It depends on who they play. You play the Houston Texans, no. Like,
Yeah.
no. Like, and I don't think the Broncos are still an elite defense. They might not be the Texans, but I think you're going to need a little bit more than that. I mean, even last year in the postseason when they played the Broncos, Max Hollins made several big plays. I believe Curtis Samuel had a long touchdown as well. So when we get into the postseason, you play against some better defenses than the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, we're going to need all 11 players out there to bring their share of the pie.
Let's flip to the defensive side of the ball. The Bills in the second half of this game, really at the end of the first half, but more in the second half, went a lot more with blitzes. And at the end of the day, that's what won them a game, being aggressive and, Carl, playing into the volatility because not all the blitzes worked in this game. Joe Burrow, that guy can play some quarterback.
Boy, I mean, it was so special to see Joe Burrow out there and the plays that he was making. It was different than Josh because Josh is just a physical mutant, while Joe Burrow was making so many plays post snap where I'm like, what made you get off of that so quickly? Well, I don't know. You got a computer in your brain. We made the comparison post game Sunday, and I would bring it to this platform as well. For any of you guys who have ever played blackjack before and you keep listening to everyone at the table and they keep telling you, well, this is what the book says. And the book is getting you whooped. Your pockets are getting dry and you down to like your last few chips. So you start hitting on 16s, doubling on 12. You splitting aces when you don't need to. You hitting when it's the dealer showing 5, and you like, I don't care. I don't care. I'm just turning up the volatility because the other stuff wasn't working. I'm gonna go broke listening to the book. Might as well live into the volatility and just let the chips fall where they may. And if when you watch the Bills on Sunday, that's exactly how it played out. When they just sat there and just played by the book and dropped in his own coverage, Joe Burrow was eating them up. When they turned up the heat a little bit, Joe Burrow was eating them up still, but it also invited some volatile plays where he was sacked on a corner blitz. The first drive of the second half, 2 blitzes they sent, 2 incomplete errant throws by Joe Burrow. And then we go to the fourth quarter. They did get beat on a cover 0 blitz for a touchdown. T. Higgins did get a big completion over the middle on a blitz. But you know what also happened when they blitz? Christian Benford got a pick 6. So I think that if you're not going to be a good defense in general and you have Josh Allen on the other side, lean into that volatility because all you need, and I said it on BKL Sunday, 3 stops. You get 3-4 stops and you get that guy the ball back on the other side, I think you'll be in good shape.
Especially when one of those stops is a touchdown. That also helps. It makes it a whole lot easier to let Josh Allen operate when he's up 7-0 in general to begin with. I totally agree. I think, especially in games if Joey Bosa is not going to play, this has kind of got to be the modus operandi, which is we're going to fire whatever we got at the offense and we're going to lose a few. But if we win a few also, that will be enough. Talk about losing a few. Look, Jamar Chase usually is good enough to make everybody lose a few. The Bills actually did a pretty good job against him, 5 catches, 40-some yards. But, Carl, that was not an accident.
No, they threw the kitchen sink in terms of coverage, the coverage menu at slowing down Jamar Chase, whether it was Christian Benford in man coverage, but he was the underneath player. He had safety help right on top of him. I believe I counted 5 snaps where he was one-on-one, and all of those snaps they blitzed. They never for 1 second allowed any player to be one-on-one with Jamar Chase. How about another situation where they would cloud Jamar Chase, where they would put a safety or a linebacker underneath him and then let Christian Benford be over top? Or then another time on a 3rd down and they didn't execute it, but they tried to bracket him, but unfortunately he was in a slot and Cam Lewis got beat for an out route on the third down. They threw so many different things at trying to slow down Jamar Chase that I think on Monday, Tuesday, leading up to game day, they just had stop one on the whiteboard and they just figured out 10 different things to try to do it. And it worked for majority of the game. Obviously, that allowed Gesicki and T. Higgins to eat, but you're not going to take away everything with how the Bengals are constructed and also where the Bills are at state right now either.
And this is kind of a comment, too, on some of the stats that were out there. I think Next Gen Stats had a number
Yeah.
about coverages with Christian Benford as the closest player to Jamar Chase. This is not to knock Christian Benford, who played well, who did what he's supposed to do in this game, and obviously made a couple of the big plays. But this was not Christian Benford versus Jamar Chase. This was Sean McDermott and Bobby Babbage against Jamar Chase. And they did a good job, even at the expense of everything else in the defense.
I'm happy you phrased it like that because two things can be true. Christian Benford executed what was asked of him to a T. He was asked to be the underneath defender in man coverage all day on Jamar Chase. But I know what actually playing one-on-one with a receiver all game looks like. And that wasn't that. Jamar Chase kind of hinted at that yesterday, but that's not Christian Benford's fault. He executed what was asked of him. So you give him 10 claps on the back for how he played Sunday.
Let's talk about a couple other players in the secondary. You brought one of them up just now. Cam Lewis, who I think is a guy that we've liked for a long time in terms of his ability to do so many things. He plays tough. But the last few weeks, the tackling problem is reaching an epidemic level. He missed at least two I can think of off the top of my head, and they were bad open field plays that you have to make. This is a guy that's going to keep getting snaps because they don't have someone else to play nickel. They like to run out a lot of defensive backs. They don't have any new players coming in free agency because apparently they don't want to show up if you claim them on waivers. Anyway, where are we with Cam Lewis right now?
It's a tough spot to be. And I think that we're going to see an uptick in Jordan Hancock snaps a little bit. And I think that here's the issue, though. The Bills love dime right now, which means 6 defensive backs on the field, which takes a linebacker off. So Cam Lewis has to play in that scenario. But I would, starting this week against Drake, but the Patriots are unique, though, because they live in a lot of 12 personnel, so you weren't going to play a lot of dime, you would think. I would personally, if I was in Bobby Babbage's and Sean McDermott's shoes, give Hancock a little bit more runway here and say, hey, can we give him some more looks and see what he looks like? Because I see what I'm getting with Cam at this point, and he's going to be a guy who's in the right spot. I just don't know if he's always going to execute the given play.
The tough part about that is there was one Cam Lewis missed tackle, which was followed immediately by a Jordan Hancock missed tackle, which was the Samaje Perine catch and run on third down in the first half. I agree with you, though. I think more Hancock would be the way to go. And that's not to totally push Cam Lewis away.
Correct.
Real quick, it almost feels like in baseball, sometimes Chuck Knobloch had this. He played forever at second base. He made a throw to first base a gazillion times. And then suddenly at one point in his career, he couldn't do it anymore. Can that happen with tackling where you miss a few and it just becomes a thing that piles on top and you keep doing the wrong thing, missing the wrong or going to the wrong part of the body and not be able to tackle for no particular good reason?
Yeah, I think you overthink it at times. I think that, I mean, you kind of think so much on like, okay, here's the exact technique they want me to do. Here's the exact technique they want me to do. But in this scenario, that technique won't work because you got to stop them from getting the first down. You know what I'm trying to say? So it can get in your head a little bit. But I mean, at the end of the day, don't be a robot out there. Just be a ball player.
The other guy I want to talk about is Max Hairston, who got much more significant time and certainly probably his best test of the year when you have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on each side of the field. Carl, my initial reaction is that there were a lot of plays where this game looked too big for him. Not all of them. There were a couple plays, but it did seem like this was as good an education, and we're putting that generously as Hairston has got all year.
Yeah, I think the combine draft profile on Max Hairston was that he is a really good zone corner, or that you see the potential there, and then he has some things to work on in man. And we saw it at St. John Fisher at training camp where he did a good job feeling routes, but in one-on-ones, it just wasn't something that he was great at the time. And the plays that he's made so far in the Bills uniform has been really, if he's a zone defender and he keeps everything in front of him and he makes a play like those interceptions, like when he's running step for step with Xavier Worthy. But the man reps are something that he has to work on. And I think that you saw that come to fruition against the Bengals. And listen, I know T. Higgins is great, but I thought he didn't use great technique on the touchdown. I thought that even if T. Higgins catches that ball, we have to be more competitive in how we get to that point. You know what I'm trying to say? Or I do like the pass breakup he did have on T. Higgins later in the game, but then the Mike Gesicki play on third down, or I don't know if it was third down, but in that fourth quarter.
Go ahead.
Was that third down?
The third down I'm thinking of was actually a T. Higgins play. It was 3rd and 6, and I think Higgins was in the slot ran a pretty straightforward either in or post, and Hairston was giving 5 or 6 yards of space the whole way. It was about as easy a 3rd and 6 conversion as you can get.
But there was also one when he was the backside against Mike Gesicki, and he ran an out route. We can't lose the tight ends. We can't.
Yep.
And I know Mike Gesicki is a good player, but we're first-round picks. We got to be competitive. I promise you, when they watched it on Monday, everyone's teasing you saying we don't lose the tight end. So I just think that it was a good learning lesson, and it didn't help that you're in the snow because you're really fighting for your life. Having said that, though, I think that's just good learning lesson on just how it's a little different when you got to go man-to-man with some of these mutants out here in the NFL.
It's one thing I wanted to bring up. The snow takes away his best attribute. He's a speed guy, not a size guy. The speed was sapped by the snow. The size, especially for T. Higgins, was not. Real quick, the Bills' last 2 run defense games have been their best statistically of the year. Least yards allowed. Now, look, Pittsburgh and Cincy don't run it well to begin with. But I do like the fact, Carl, that they are attacking more with linebackers and with defensive backs to assist in the run game. Go back to what you talked about with volatility. You can't just play by the book, run defensively with the hand that the Bills have been dealt. So they have to attack, and it's been effective the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, Shaq Thompson is a big representative of that. His knockback on blocks is just teach tape for all the kiddos out there. If you want to know how to be violent and play linebacker, don't watch my tape. Go watch Shaq Thompson's tape. And then also, I think that the safeties have done a good job of filling in from distance, which is a good test on how good of a run defense you are. How do your safeties and DBs tackle? That play that Jordan Poyer made, where he's sitting flat foot at 10 yards, and on the snap, the C gap opens up like the Red Sea, and he comes downhill and stops it for a 1-yard gain. That's something that wasn't going to happen back in week 3 or 4 of the season. We'll see if they can keep building upon that. But that is what I like to see about a team: violence in the front 7, then also safeties who can come downhill like a bat out of hell.
We got a couple minutes left here. I want to talk about the next game coming here, the Patriots. This was a team that I don't think any of us thought would be 10 or 11-2, whatever they are. So clearly there were things we didn't know about this team going in. After having seen them play Buffalo back in week 5 and what the Patriots have done since, what is on your mind now going into this rematch against New England, and how do you view it differently probably than we did back in the early part of October?
I'm going to make mine simple and sweet, and it leads right into my wheelhouse of who I am as a person. I need to see the game plan for Stephon Diggs. I need to see how that changes up this time, because of late they've had Christian Benford follow a receiver to any given side. But Stephon Diggs, they move him around everywhere, whether it is the backside of a formation, whether it is into the slot. I'm interested to see how the Bills combat that, because he was the can man in the matchup against Orchard Park. He was saying anybody can get it. It was Trey White. It was Christian Benford. So I wanted to see what is the Bills' game plan this time around, because Stephon Diggs isn't the physical freak that Jamar Chase is, or a DK Metcalf, but he is a smart, savvy player that does a really good job in scramble drill, does a really good job of uncovering himself in zone coverage. I want to see the Bills' game plan against Diggs for round 2.
2 things from my point of view. Number 1, I went back and read my notes, and one of the things that stood out was that the Patriots defense was incredibly disciplined. In the run game, it helped because there wasn't any out-the-gate runs for James Cook. Yeah, he might have hit some 4s and 6s, but there were no 40s and 60s. But on top of that, they did not let Josh Allen beat them with big scrambles all night long. They didn't really pressure him a ton, but there wasn't anything crazy with Allen using his legs. How much can the Patriots continue to do that? And especially without Milton Williams, who was a big part of their run defense, he won't play in this game. The other thing was, going back to volatility again, the Bills in that game blitzed Drake May twice in the first half, 8 times in the second half. Was a lesson learned there that we can't just play this kid straight up just because he's a rookie and just because his best receiver is a guy that we sent packing a couple years ago? I think that's a lesson that might be learned and might be different for the Bills going into this one.
Amen to that one.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of BKL Nightly. Let's talk ball. I want to thank Carl Jones, as always, for joining me. We'll be back next week to talk with Carl again about the Bills and the Patriots. Remember, you can always see this show on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, WIVB Plus, and on Rochester First every single week. Had a good time talking to you this week about the Snow Globe game. We'll see if there's another one. Until next week, I'm Thad. He's Carl. Talk to you later.